Hello everyone and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 158, and in keeping in tradition, in the last 3 years I believe, I have made a dub techno or dub techno related episode twice a year. I've been doing one in the summer and one in the winter, and that's given me enough space, I would say, to represent all of the cool dub techno. And for this episode, it's going to be bordering on tech house too. I've been, as my collection's gotten bigger, as you can see behind me, I have shelves and I have other shelves in my house. Like, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm pulling the trigger on new releases less, and I'm kind of refining what I've been buying. Right now, the genres that I'm buying are old progressive house because it's really cheap and really fun, and I really love that like dark progressive sound from like '01 to '04. I buy a lot of modern tech house and minimal because I still like to recreate that after hours vibe, even though admittedly I really can't go out anymore at this point in my life, or I barely do. And dub techno. So it's basically those three are what I'm spending most of my money on. And even in the dub techno realm, there's like kind of a vanilla sound that if a producer were just setting out and didn't know a lot about electronic music, they would probably end up making generic sounding dub techno. And I have enough of that on my shelves from 2007 on up to where I don't really feel like I need that anymore. So when I do buy dub techno related releases now, they're almost more fringing on other genres. So that's what you're gonna get mostly in this episode with me. I don't think there's anything that's like straight down the middle vanilla dub techno, and maybe that's better. I think that keeps it a little bit more interesting. I also want to try to stay away from obvious releases. Like, I almost dropped an Echo Space reissue in here, but I'm like, everybody sees those. Everybody knows those. So I want to try to feature some of the more obscure oddities that you may have overlooked, because I believe that's the most useful aspect of my channel. It's just music discovery, and you might also find some of like the little historical anecdotes interesting too. For today's episode, I have 5 tracks that I'm going to pitch to you, and let's get started here. The first is a dub techno staple, been popular since he broke out with his Snowflake series, Reining, Will I Dream During the Process. This is Yagya, and there's something weird about this. So it's on the Under the Radar label, which is it's a quality label. They also did the Yagya reissue with the deep chord redesigns. That's a really awesome album. Coconut's weird because it came out, I think it was produced in 2008, but it was only featured on this weird, if you search Yagya Coconut on Discogs and just look down in the list, you'll see that it was featured on this weird 39 file digital only compilation. It's like, why the hell is that on there? But I don't know if somebody caught on to it, or maybe people caught on to it on YouTube and asked Yagya to release it, and here he did. So the original Coconut is actually the kind of the vanilla dub techno flavor that I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. So if it were just that track on here, I probably would not have paid $13 or $15 for it, which is what this costs from Red Eye Records in the UK. I bought this for the Octal Industries remix on the A2, and I did a episode for Jonas. Jonas is the real name for Octal Industries. I did an episode on him. I really like that guy's sound, and here the Octal remix is the most club aggressive version that you'll get on here. The variations that are on the B side here are also pretty cool. It looks like it's variation Q and Z, if I'm looking at this correctly. Those are nice. Like, I don't have anything that I dislike on here, but that Octal track, man, as it gets towards the end, it has a really soaring synth that I think remains subtle in a small room like this that I'm in here, but if you had that in a bigger space, I think it would really open up big time. And there's just something kind of like Mark Anthony, I don't know how else to describe it. There's something like Mark Anthony about the way the bass and the percussion hits. It's just kind of like the track that I would like to hear towards like the peak time era of like a dub techno or techno related set. Like it just kind of, it has like a very chuggy, dancey type feel to it. I will say the mastering on this record, maybe not even the mastering, like the levels, it's a little bit bass heavy. Like I noticed when I put on the Octal, or actually any of the versions that are on here, like it's like I don't really get the highs unless I have it really cranked. Otherwise, they're sort of lurking in the background. And I was almost tempted to walk over to my subwoofer and turn it down a little bit because it just seemed like it was like slightly a little bit bass heavy. But I don't think it's to the point of being a fault. It was just something that I noticed. The other thing I noticed about the pressing is that on my gains, I had to take it up past like maybe to like 1 o'clock, which I thought was odd because there's probably only like 16 or 17 minutes of music on each side. And you would think that you would still be able to get like your normal loud cut on a 12 with, you know, 16 or 17 minutes of music on both sides. So maybe not the most ideal mastering for it, but I do think it turned out great. And for me, anything Yagya does that's 4 stars or above is a given, and to me this is 5 stars, so check out Coconut Rice. Going back to the obscurities theme, I want to talk to you guys about artists that you may not have heard of. And in the dub techno world, there's a label called Outlaw. Outlaw is run by a producer named Matthew O, and O is spelled O-H. Outlaw does releases that look just like this. No, there's never any cover art. They come in a white sleeve and they all have this guy. I don't know what this dude's supposed to be, but he's on every one of the records. So from the perspective of being unassuming and easy to overlook, I think they are. But there's also a pretty, like the artist roster on Outlaw has got some pretty heavy hitters. There's Matthew O, who I think is kind of like a sleeper, underrated producer. There's Gradient. There's Modernism. Who else is on there? Somebody else I can't think of right now. But it's got like a really nice roster. And, you know, Matthew might be the best producer on the label, you know, and I don't want to throw shade at anybody else, but if you go back and listen to the first few releases on that label, they all have really strong Matthew O tracks on them. And for Matthew O, it seems like he's like kind of like Roger Gerressen, where he fringes between tech house and dub techno. So you're getting like the dub techno skanks with the echo, and then what really makes Matthew stand out to me is his percussions. Like he's got really good percussion lines, and the track for me on here, let me first say this entire EP is a huge winner. This was like a no-brainer. I'm definitely buying this. It's not like I'm trying to just justify it because I like one out of the 4 tracks. Like they're all heaters. But for me, the B2 Voices just has that like tech house, pounding throb with the really, I guess, kind of like dazzling and intricate percussions that Matthew has devised, and like I said, fused with a dub techno undertone. So really, really cool, like Roger Garrison-esque stuff. If you like Jewel Imprint, for example, this would be the type of track that you could fuse into that type of set. But man, when the kick drum hits in this, like, I really just can't help but dance. I can't help it. Coming at you with more obscurities. I bet you haven't heard of this artist. I never heard of them before. This is the duo named DP-6 and their 4 Elements release. It's on this label that I can't even pronounce. It kind of looks like spinach, but it's not that. It's like SPC LNCH. Yeah, I know it's not spinach. I'm just being goofy there with that. But I don't have any other records from this label. Here they are with the 4 Elements release. For some reason, it made me think back to Captain Planet. When I was a kid, I would watch Captain Planet, and there was like, what was it? Earth, fire, wind, water, and heart. There's no heart on here, but the other 4 Captain Planet, I guess, participants are represented on here. My track of choice is called Earth. Again, this is not pure dub techno, but it contains dub techno elements. It has the skanks, the reverb. And I also found that the track Earth in particular had a touch of like some dark prog or dark tech house elements. Probably, I would say like more dark prog, like just kind of like those kind of like drugged out synths that it just sounds like a key stab, and it has like a growl to it. You'll hear that in Earth. And man, I mean, I feel like this last order that I got from Red Eye, which also had Yagya Coconut, and this has just been absolute fire. Every time I'm playing these records, I end up dancing and going completely nuts in this room by myself, which is funny to think about and admit here. But check out this release. I don't know if it's a one-off, a one-hit wonder, or if they have more depth in their catalog that needs to be explored. But if they do, please let me know. This release is absolute fire. Anybody that's been in the electronic scene for a long time is probably familiar or has at least brushed up against Manuel Gotching's E2 E4. I don't know if I pronounced Manuel's name correctly, but he's famous for, in 1984, releasing a strange ambient record called E2 E4 that was made with pretty much cutting edge synthesizer equipment at the time. If you think about, to me, if you think back in pop music, if you're an 80s fan, to me, 1984 is actually a cutoff point from where before that, it's almost like 80s music sounded more like 70s music, if that makes any sense. Like I almost consider like the 70s to include 1981 and 1982 because they were all kind of stuck with the same instruments. It wasn't until 1984, I don't know if some new gear came out, but that gear became part of like a new cheery, like that 80s cheese that the 80s is known and loved for is because of the gear that was being used in a lot of those tracks. And if you're interested in seeing what I'm talking about with 1984, I'll post a link in the description to my 1984 list that I've curated, where every time I found a track that was released in 1984 that I liked, I would just add it to that list. And you can see it's just nothing but 80s mega hits from start to finish. So Manuel Gotching does E2 E4, which, by the way, is a reference to a chessboard. I don't know why he chose that name for it, but E2 E4 is the most common move that white plays to start out a chess game. So somehow that is represented in the cover art. The original E2 E4 has like kind of a brown and white chessboard, and Alex Cassian resurrected E2 E4 just in the last 2 weeks with his reissue here. Now this is the back of it. They wanted to pay homage to the original, so they preserved the dark brown on beige chessboard color theme and just kind of like evolved it into their own. But I really like this cover art. I think this is really nice. I'm keeping it inside of plastic, but Alex Cassian is a pretty well-respected ambient producer. I think he really is going to put himself on the map with this project. And Mad Professor, I'll admit I'm not a dub reggae guy, but I looked at him on Discogs and he had people applauding him, and it looks like he's been around for decades. So anybody that's been in the business that long has their sound down. And I think Mad Professor and Alex did a great job of resurrecting this Manuel classic. My choice for you here, and the one that I've sampled, is the Mad Professor's Qantas Crazy remix. Maybe more like a remake. There's still heavy influence from the original. The original E2 E4, for example, doesn't really have a kick. It just kind of like meanders and drifts for 22, 23, 24 minutes, something like that. Here you're getting a nice 12-minute version. So right there, as soon as you see that 12-minute duration, you're like, all right, this producer took their time. They're trying to create something that everybody can sit down and listen to and relax without having to get up right away. Like, to me, that's a big deal as I've gotten older. So what did Mad Professor add to it? A different arrangement and a really nice dubby, heavy bass line. I would say if the original is missing anything, it's low end. It's not that it doesn't have any low end, but Mad Professor remade it and tuned it up and gave it a legit polishing that I think will make this a classic. If you look on Discogs, hundreds of owners already. It just dropped like literally 5 days ago, and there's 200-300 ones. So I really would not be surprised to see this record sell up into the thousands, like not thousands of dollars, but thousands of owners will accumulate this over time. So check out Mad Professor's Qantas remix of E2 E4. And my last pick for you, it's a bit of a stretch for a episode with dub techno in the title, but I thought it was really sick and I wanted to drop it in here because I know a lot of dub techno fans like Roger Gerressen for his crossover factor, and I mentioned that earlier in this episode. So this is another Roger Gerressen discovery that I recently made. It's a track that is hard to pin down as far as genre goes. I would say house with some dub and tech house influences. And this is Roger Gerressen's track called Leafs 2, like leaves on a tree, number 2. And I really love this. It has such a cool drum line in it. And there are traces of dub techno elements in it, like that like skanking reverb sound. But Roger put some interesting effects on it that I think make this track just kind of playful and very unique. So if you were playing like a dub tech house set and you wanted to throw your audience a curveball but really keep the dance floor moving, Leafs 2 is just like such a weird, it's like in baseball it would be the knuckleball. Like it's that weird pitch that like nobody really can get a beat on. And like I said, I can't really pin down the genre of it, but I know the bass line is absolutely rolling and sick. The percussions are nasty, and the dub influences really just open it up. Alright, and this concludes my Summa Dub Techno episode. I hope you enjoyed these picks. If you feel inspired by any of these, please comment down below and let me know if you like them. If there's anything that these tracks remind you of, feel free to make recommendations down below. I don't always get to the comments right away, but I do read them, and a lot of times it sends me off on cool little twists and turns in the Discogs world. So I'm always happy to hear recommendations like, hey, this is my favorite track by this guy. You might have missed it. Check it out. So drop that down below, and big thank you to the artists here, Med Professor, Alex Cashian, Roger Gerressen, Matthew O, DP-6, and Yagya. I had to look at my stack there. But thank you all for the great music, and I'm looking forward to jamming to these for the rest of the summer. Take care.